Let's talk about ethics. This is what we mean by ethical behavior. It's doing the right thing when no one else is watching, even when doing the wrong thing is legal. And what you'll realize is that there's a big difference between the law and ethics. The law really represents the minimum standard that we all must follow. Ethics represents a much higher standard. And one of the reasons why there is such a demand for CFA charter holders is because employers know, one, that we've studied ethics on every single one of the CFA exams, because ethics represents 10 to 15% of every exam. Plus, as CFA charter holders, every single year we have to sign this sworn statement saying that we've lived up to and followed the CFA Code of Ethics and Standards of Professional Conduct. And although that doesn't guarantee that we're going to be ethical, from an employer's point of view, it certainly increases the probability that we are, because we do have a disciplinary review committee, so that when a charter holder is accused of doing something improper, we have a group of people who investigate the charge, and then we have a jury of CFA charter holders, if you will, who will decide on if there's a validity in the charge against the charter holder, and in an extreme case, we can take the charter away. That doesn't happen very often, but it certainly does happen. So it kind of makes you stop and think, after having studied for so many hours, for so many years, do you want to risk losing your charter because you did something stupid, for lack of a better term? All right? By the way, if you have any questions or comments about anything I'm saying or will say, just stop me. So here's the point. A lot of you mentioned the financial crisis. Well, the financial crisis occurred in 2008. So right now we're 10 years after the crisis. And I bring this up because CFA Institute changed its mission after the financial crisis. So prior to the financial crisis, our mission was to lead the investment profession globally by promoting the highest standards of ethics, education, and professional excellence, period. After the crisis, we added that last line for the ultimate benefit of society. Because if you think about it, it really was the global society that suffered in the financial crisis. People lost their homes, many people lost their jobs, and even more people lost their life savings. So at CFA Institute, we really believe that if we're able to raise the educational level of investment professionals in our industry, and if we're able to increase the ethical behavior of investment professionals in our industry, that is what will ultimately benefit society. So that's what we're trying to do. Now, I'm not going to ask you this because Roman asked you this earlier. Why should you act ethically? Actually, I will ask you. Why should you act ethically? Because I have a slightly different response than he did. Anybody want to give me an answer? Why should you act ethically? Yes, okay, you want to ensure fair markets as a market participant?
If you act fair, you expect everybody to act fair.
If you, yes, I get that, I like that. You were going to say?
I'm going to say that trust to any persons on the market reduce transaction costs.
Okay, yes.
It makes the market more efficient and profit bigger.
That's correct, yes. But here's another reason why. I like this quote. It says, when I do good, I feel good. When I do bad, I feel bad. That is my religion. And the purpose of this quote really should emphasize that for all of the reasons that you said, of course, this is why you should act ethically, but you should really want to do the right thing from internal, because you know what you're doing is the right thing to do. So yes, there are laws. Acting ethically will keep you out of jail, will make the markets more efficient, but really, doing the right thing should just make you feel good about yourself. All right? Now, I always ask this question of everyone. How many of you have ever seen this movie called The Wolf of Wall Street? Raise your hand. Everybody says it. Well, unfortunately, I think The Wolf of Wall Street gives you, many people, the wrong impression about what investment professionals do. So, I'm just going to do this. What investment professionals really do is to communicate knowledge and information to clients. Because most clients don't know anything about investments, about securities, about finance. So your job as an investment professional is to communicate that information, that knowledge that you've gained to them. That's really what they rely upon you. They also want you to hopefully cause change in their lives, positive change, because as an investment professional, you are helping clients achieve their goals. Whether it's to save money for retirement, whether it's to save money to send their children to university, whatever, your goal is to cause positive change in their lives. Your goal is also to instruct and guide them, because they're like, tell me, how can I achieve this goal? So you're going to develop an investment policy statement, and you're going to guide them and say, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to invest, etc. All right? Last thing, you're going to exercise all of the knowledge that you gained from training and education to benefit them. That's really what you do as an investment professional. And so much of being an investment professional depends upon trust. And you mentioned this. Remember, I was asking you, everyone, this question: what would you say to a client who invested in your recommendation and the stock went down? I thought you all gave very good answers to that, because there's no guarantee. But clients don't get upset if you make the wrong recommendation, because obviously you used reasonable care and prudent judgment in your analysis. So they only get upset if they don't trust you. And that's really the key quality to a good investment professional, is being able to develop that trust with your clients. So, when it comes to ethics, this is how we define ethics at the Institute. It starts with education. You not only have to know about finance and investments, but you also have to know all about the laws, rules, and regulations in the countries that you are doing business. So you can't have ethics without education. Equally as important, ethics requires thinking about honesty, integrity, character, and this last one is stewardship. So, who's been to the doctor within the past year? Raise your hand. Okay? So think about when you went to the doctor. You went there because you weren't feeling well. You go to the doctor, you tell him or her what's wrong with you. They ask you a series of questions. They give you a checkup. And at the end, they prescribe medicine or some course of action that you need to follow. So think about it. As you were sitting there listening to that doctor, you really trusted that individual, and you believed that everything that they were telling you to do was solely in your best interest. Is that right? Yeah. So doctors, in a sense, are stewards of our health and body. We entrust them with our health and body, and in return, we expect them to carefully and responsibly manage our health only in our best interest. Well, as financial professionals, it's the same thing. Clients are coming to us and they are entrusting their money to us. And in return, they expect us to carefully and responsibly manage that money solely in their best interest. So we are stewards of our clients' money. Now, our goal today is simple. We just want to encourage you to become more conscious and aware of your own thoughts and behaviors, but also to recognize that ethical dilemmas are a normal and predictable part of many jobs in our industry. So let me ask you this. Do you have stockbrokers or financial consultants here? Yes? Yes. Okay, so here's my question. How are stockbrokers paid? By commissions. Now, does that represent an ethical dilemma? Yes, and what's the ethical dilemma?
Because some companies may pay more fee, depends on the amount of job.
Yes, they may get paid more. Also, when you work on commission, you only get paid if the client is buying what you're selling. Is that right? So it's at the end of the month and you get a call from your stockbroker and who is recommending an investment to you. And you have to ask yourself, is that stockbroker recommending that investment to me because it's in my best interest? Or is that stockbroker recommending that investment to me because it's at the end of the month and they have to pay their rent, they have to pay their car note, and whatever? This is not to say that stockbrokers or anybody else who works on commission is unethical. I am saying, though, that anybody who works on commission faces this ethical dilemma every day. So it's a normal and predictable part of their jobs. Okay? Now, we're going to talk about some solutions to that. Now, here's the thing. Most presentations and in most classes, your professors will say, put away your cell phones, put away that laptop, put away that iPad. Is that right? Well, in this particular session, I'm actually going to ask you to get out your cell phones, your whatever, because here's what we're going to do. I am going to put you into some real-life ethical dilemmas that people have told me that they face. And you're going to use your phone to vote anonymously on what you would do in that particular situation. So I'm going to show the case on the screen, and you're also going to see the case on your phone. All right? And vote through there. So here's what all right, so this is what I want you to do. Everybody go to www.responseware.com, and that's going to be your login. It's not case sensitive. Okay. Let's turn this on real quickly. Let's hope this works. Responseware, yeah, I'll show it to you right again. Here we go. All right, let's see. Start from current slide. All right, you got it? And if you've done it correctly, you'll see case closed. Do you see it? All right, CFA 1. And you'll see like a clock that says case closed. All right? All right, good. Polling closed. That's correct. All right, so let me go back. Okay. All right, so here is the first situation. Hold on. Let's see, is this it? Yeah. All right, you see it on your... Yes, all right. Yay. All right, here's the situation. True story. So, Your boss who hired you and has mentored you for the past 3 years is being unfairly let go because of office politics. As the sole support of her family, she is concerned about finding another job. So 2 weeks before she's scheduled to leave, she places a stack of files on your desk and asks you to copy them because she will use them in her job search. The files contain research reports that she wrote, marketing presentations containing her performance record, and spreadsheet models that she created. So what do? Do you A, copy the files, B, refuse to copy the files, C, only copy the research reports that she wrote, or D, only copy the spreadsheets that she created? So I'll give you an opportunity to talk amongst yourselves or whatever, and you should be able to enlarge that, by the way, and just hit A, B, C, or D. All right, have you voted? Okay, let's see. Let's see. All right, so before I reveal the results, is there any ethical issues here? Yeah, what? Yes, sir.
Materials which you present, which you prepare when you're working on your employee is employer's property, and when you leave, then you should manage to create this spreadsheet, this research report by your own, using only public available information, but not use a report which you created while you were employed.
Okay, perfect answer. You've been reading that code and standards too closely, but yes, you're exactly right. Everything that you do at your employer is the property of the employer. So what she's really asking you to do is to help her steal company property. So let's see what you said, and I'll tell you what exactly happened. You see the results? All right, good. All right, so 85% of you said you would refuse to copy the files. 10% of you, and thank you for being honest, 10%, said that they copied the files. 5% said only copy the research reports. So who said, I know you said, who said refuse to copy the files? Okay, great. So let me ask you this. What are you going to say to your boss, who is still your boss, for the next 2 weeks? Now remember, this is the boss who hired you and has mentored you for the past 3 years. This is the boss who's being unfairly let go because of office politics, and she's the sole support of her family. What are you going to say to her?
I will say that I'm not obligated to do it.
Well, she's like, well,
sorry.
I'm your boss for the next 2 weeks.
I told her, sorry.
It will be conflict of interest. It's not fair from her side to say that. I mean, you act according to the ethical standards and follow all the rules.
Right.
So it's not.
So you're just going to say no?
No, I'm sorry, but there is some rules that I want to follow.
Okay.
She
Okay.
wants to involve you in unethical actions.
Well, she just wants you to help her, right?
I will try to help her in different way.
Okay, all right. Like help her take her computer out.
I will tell her, okay, I have a friend who are looking for a job, who are looking to someone to hire.
I got it.
Like
I
that.
got it. Yes, sir.
So I would tell her that I would ask the boss
if I can copy the report, because if boss allows her to copy the report she made,
Yes.
I can do that. So that's I would say sorry, but I can do that because it's unethical and it's stealing of property of the company. But I will talk to the boss, and if he allows me, I will do that.
Okay, all right. Is that what you were going to say? Of course, right. Well, here's what happened in the real life situation. This person copied the files. They copied the files. They felt uncomfortable about doing it. But at that particular moment, what do you say to a boss who hired you and mentored you? You know she's being unfairly, or you feel she's being unfairly let go. You know she's the sole support of her family. So this individual actually copied the files. They felt uncomfortable about doing it, but they still copied the files. So 2 weeks later, the boss left, and it still bothered this individual. So they went and talked to the boss's boss. The boss's boss wasn't happy that this individual had copied the files, but they were at least relieved that it bothered this person so much that they felt like they had to say something. Yeah.
Maybe if in case if you feel very bad.
Yes.
Maybe the right it's just a possibility. The right situation is if that person grew you for 3 years.
Yes.
Maybe you can just live with that person, with the person. It's the personal things. If you're very uncomfortable,
Yeah.
or saying no,
Yeah.
no, you can leave.
Okay, yes, and then and with no job, and you go back home and live with mom and dad for another year or so, right? But that's it. That is a possibility. Yes, but one of the reasons why I like this particular case, it's a true story, is because it illustrates this: is that people often make unethical decisions not because they are bad people, but because they're often affected by psychological biases, situational factors, as well as social and organizational influences. It's these things that can affect our decision making. All right? So some of these biases, factors are, one is obedience to authority. Oftentimes our boss asks us to do something and we do it without really questioning why they're asking us to do it or what are the ethical issues surrounding what they're asking us to do. So obedience to authority. Next one is conformity bias. We see a lot of people doing something and we kind of follow the crowd. And you go, if they're doing it, we might as well do it too. Again, without questioning what are the ethical issues around what this whole crowd of people are doing. Third one is incrementalism, that gradual shift down the slippery slope. Have you ever heard of the boiling frog syndrome? No? Some of you? Well, don't try this at home, okay? Here's the thing. If you put a frog in boiling water, it will immediately jump out because it can feel the heat of the water. But if you put a frog in cold or lukewarm water and then turn up the heat, the frog will eventually boil to death because they won't be able to notice the gradual change in temperature. And this is how people react when it comes to ethical behavior. They may start off doing something minor that's unethical, but then the things that they do grow more serious and more serious without them really realizing how that is, how they're getting worse and worse as things go on. The last one is overconfidence. When people think I'm more ethical than they are, it won't happen to me. And that's really dangerous because sometimes if you're so confident in your own ethics, then you won't stop and think about the potential consequences or the perceptions of what you are about to do before you do them. So these are just a couple of factors that can cause unethical behavior. I'm going to skip this one, but I like this quote. Ethics can be dangerous to your career because you may be called upon to do things that turn out to be unethical or illegal. So here are two studies that were done in the United States. One was done at Harvard University, which found that many of its graduates received explicit instructions from their middle managers or felt strong organizational pressures to do things that they believed were sleazy, unethical, or sometimes illegal. A Columbia University study found that 40% of graduates had been rewarded for taking some action they considered to be ethically troubling, while 31% of those who refused to act in ways they considered to be unethical believed that they were penalized for their choice, compared to less than 20% who felt they had been rewarded. So these things do happen. Here's an example. This gentleman, Fabrice Touré, he worked for Goldman Sachs. And he was found liable on 6 of 7 counts for defrauding investors. So at his trial, he said, I was a big team player. If there was something wrong with this transaction, wouldn't people have told me? And obviously they didn't. Okay? Another guy, Thomas Hayes, he 31. He was the only trader cited in the LIBOR investigation. They were manipulating the London interbank offering rate. And what he said was, who was I to question what they were doing? I thought it was weird, but that's how they did it. So within a few months, based on practices at the bank and feedback from his bosses, Mr. Hayes considered it part of his job. Last gentleman was Kweku Adubale. He lost $2.2 billion. When this happened, his name and face was the only, he worked for UBS. His name and face was the only name and face on the page of every paper in the world. I have to tell you, it's very hard for one person to lose $2.2 billion. It's not like you hit the delete key on your computer and the money goes down the drain. So what did he say? At his trial, he said senior managers were aware of his actions and encouraged him to take risks. Circumventing the bank's rules was common practice, and I only got in trouble because I lost money. And that's the irony of it working sometimes in the investment field. Everybody loves you when you're generating profits. Nobody knows you when you start generating losses. 3 guys, all in their late 20s, early 30s, who were very successful until they weren't. So it is important for us to be aware of this. All right, so here's our next case. Turn it on so you can see it in your screen. So here's the situation. You are a portfolio manager in the international sector who travels to a foreign country to investigate investment opportunities for your institutional clients. The management of a large company that you visit and a potentially attractive investment opportunity gives you a very expensive gift. Refusing the gift would be considered an insult in this country and harm the good relations that you have developed with the company's management. So, accepting the gift is A, okay, because refusal in this instance would jeopardize an investment opportunity for your clients. B, probably okay if you give the gift to charity. C, probably not okay unless your supervisor tells you, unless you tell your supervisor that you accepted the gift. And D, not okay. So before you vote and discuss it, what do you think the expensive gift should be? Now remember, you have to get it on the plane, so it can't be a car or something like that. What do you think the gift should be?
Maybe it can depend from country to country.
No, just give me an expensive gift.
Or car.
Watch. How about a watch? How about a Rolex? All right? All right. So discuss it. What would you say or do? And I could defend every one of these choices, by the way. Have you voted? Has everybody voted? All right, so I'm going to show the results in a second. But are there any issues in this particular case? Okay, so let's take you. What were you going to say before?
Like, for what are the...
Yes, you were going to say depending upon the country.
I mean, so, yeah, it's not about the expensive gifts, it's just about the gifts. So in one country, like gift that costs, for example, $100 is acceptable. In another, it's an expensive gift.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah, but talking in general about expensive gifts,
Right.
they are not acceptable.
Well, see, here's the thing. Yes.
I want to tell us that the standard about independence and objectivity, it
Right.
actually don't allow us to take expensive gift, but it was right there if it's the country that they could think that if you refuse to take this gift, it will be like harm to them.
Yes.
Actually, the standard allowed you to take this gift.
Okay.
If you will tell your employer.
Okay, all right. And in some countries, some people, some cultures don't find anything wrong with giving expensive gifts because it's part of their culture. That's just the way they are. It's not really a form of bribery. Okay? So we'll take that in and let's see what everybody said. Okay. Ooh, yeah. Well, at least somebody wants to give it to charity. Yeah. Okay. So let's start with 48% of you said C. Who said C? Okay. Let's go to the back here. C. So you said you get home from your trip and you say, supervisor, supervisor, look at what they gave me on this trip. And the supervisor says, that's a great watch. I'm tired of seeing you wear that cheap Apple Watch to work every day. Way to go. Okay, that's fine. So your supervisor says it's fine. So let's suppose a couple of days later, you go visit one of your institutional clients. And you tell the client, you know, I just got back from this country. I just saw this great company that I think would be a good investment for you. You know, their earnings are growing, they have strong cash flows, and your client gets very excited about this investment and sits down right there and writes you a check. And as you reach for the check, the client says, hey, where'd you get the watch from? And what are you going to tell the client?
Firstly, I ask my supervisor about this gift. Can I accept it
Yes.
or not? Because I want to get advice, piece of advice in this situation. If I'm not accept this gift, it will be impolite in this culture for this country.
Right.
But if my independence and my objectivity will be in the situation, if my supervisor will be informed,
Okay.
and it doesn't make any pressure on my opinion and my investment
Your investment opinion.
Investment mindset. Yeah, let's see.
And so here's the whole thing is, you thought it was an attractive investment opportunity before you got the watch, right? So what are you going to tell the client?
I just wanted to add to
Yes.
this opinion that if you're talking about such countries where this is a part of a culture,
Yes.
it's more possible that you will not have any time to ask your supervisor before accepting the
That's
gift.
true. So you accept it, you go back to the office and you go, hey, I got this watch. Supervisor says fine. Okay? So I want to know who said C? Who said C? Okay? So what do you say to the client as you reach for that check and he goes or she goes, wow, where did you get that watch from? What are you going to
I
say?
could tell that it's my boyfriend gift.
Oh, so you would lie to the client. You would lie to the client. What would you say?
You can accept this gift, but you can do not use it.
Oh, so you wouldn't wear it to the client. You would just take the watch and stick it in your drawer and not wear it there, because that's really stupid to show the client what you got.
Of course, yeah. I think it is a tricky question from my client, and it will be not a good decision to explain that I got from this company that I'm offering you to invest in.
So you would lie as well, or just not wear it?
I just say nothing about it.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I think that I should disclose that I accepted this gift before I recommend my client to invest into this company.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You're like, client, I'm about to tell you about this great investment, but I want you to be aware ahead of time that this company gave me a $10,000 watch. How do you think the client is going to feel? Is the client going to listen to you?
If this client trusts us, if he knows that he may trust us, that we put him in a way that we take this gift.
Okay, so let's go back to my doctor example. The doctor is about to give you some pills to take to get better. And he goes, before you take those pills, you see that Ferrari outside? The pharmaceutical company whose pills I'm recommending to you gave me that Ferrari outside. What would you do? Would you still take the pills?
If I
If I
believe
know
that
that they are
will help me.
It's actually how it's working now.
Okay, yes, sir.
It depends on the trust to this doctor.
Okay, the doctor. But how do you think the client, the very fact that you wouldn't tell the client the truth about where you got the watch from says what? Now we got quiet, huh? What does it say?
You ask about what will I explain.
Yes, if you're wearing the watch and the client asks you, oh man, that's a nice watch, where did you get it from?
True answer can be some kind of maybe unpleasant result for our deal with the client, but talking nothing is also against the code of ethics.
Yes.
Refusal of this gift is also not a right decision.
Okay,
So,
well, I don't know,
So-
I'm just saying, yeah.
So I will say nothing.
Okay, and you won't wear the watch there.
Yeah,
You'll wear it when you go out, you'll wear it to university the next day, but never to see the client.
Yeah, just
Comment?
I think for in my point of view, we can make like fun decision to get a deal. So if the price of of your case is growing, then that is my key. That is my watch. And when the price goes down, I give you this watch.
Oh, okay. You think the client is going to feel comfortable with that?
I think yeah.
It depends on the client. But
And his investment.
yeah.
Bigger than the price of the watch.
All right. Okay, but that's fair enough. Now, how many of you say it's not okay? Okay, so now we have the next one. I'm going to go to this table here. Let's suppose it's the last night in this country. What's your name?
Anastasia.
Anastasia. So your last night, the company has a big dinner, and they say, Anastasia, come up on stage. We have a small token of our appreciation. Go up on stage, cameras, whatever, and they give you this gift. What do? You just go, I don't want it.
Normally there is two variants how to act. You can, if your decides not to take this gift, you can explain the political situation, ethical situation in your company.
Right there on stage?
Yeah. It
And
will
say
be-
you're bribing me.
It will be weird. I agree with you. However, now I think that I give possibility for a C answer because you can take this present not like for yourself, for the company. You can put it on the place where it will be visible, and you always can say, "I was so pleased to get this gift." Not I, our company was so pleased to get this gift, and it's so important for us, and you see how we appreciate it.
Well, I think that's a good answer. You can accept the gift on behalf of the company. Anybody else got another suggestion? What do you do?
I have the same one.
Well, another alternative, if you're on stage and you don't want to say that right then and there, I think accepting the gift on behalf of the company and then giving the gift to the company is certainly a good alternative. Or you could accept the gift and then once you get off stage, explain to them, thank you very much for the gift, but unfortunately my company has a policy or whatever that prevents me from accepting such a nice gift. Okay?
Yeah,
But yes.
It will help you to show that you are following all rules, and you will probably will be more trustful in the eyes of your partners and the client's eyes. They will understand that you really follow all the rules, and they can trust you fully.
That's true. That's true. Also, so let me just clarify something about what you said about our gift giving and independence and objectivity. 5 years ago, we actually changed this standard. It used to be that you could not, as a CFA charter holder, we could not accept a gift above $100. But because we are a global organization, to put it in $100 was hard because then you'd have to translate it, what is $100 in all of these different currencies, correct? But then the question also became, well, what do you mean by $100? Do you mean $100 retail? Do you mean $100 face value? Do you mean $100 market value? It became very difficult to figure out what was meant by $100. So instead, now we say you cannot accept any gift that could be reasonably expected to compromise your independence and objectivity. So we've taken it from a rule and made it into a principle. And I have to say, there is no way getting a Rolex watch would not be reasonably expected to compromise your your independence and objectivity. And some companies do have a policy that if you are in a position where you could insult the gift giver, then just accept the gift on behalf of the company, and then we'll do something with it once you bring it back. Okay? But, and here's the whole point, even if you thought this was the best company in the world, if I'm a client and I know that company that you're recommending to me gave you a $10,000 watch, there is no way I'm believing anything you say about the company, you know? Because we live in a world today where perceptions can be as damning, if not more damning, than the reality of the situation. All right? I got one more for you, but I like this. It says, run this by the legal department, but run super fast so the ethics department doesn't see it. And as I said to you earlier, The law tells us what we can and cannot do, but ethics really focuses upon what we should and shouldn't do. So there are a lot of things that are legal, but that are still unethical to do. Similarly, there are some laws that are actually unethical, right? So it goes either way. Here's some fundamental ethical principles. Whether you are a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, investment person, these are principles that you should always follow. You should always put client interest first. It's important to maintain your independence and objectivity. We should always try and avoid conflicts of interest, but if we can't avoid them, then we need to manage them. And the best way to manage them is through full and fair disclosure so that the client or your employer can make an informed discussion. So telling the client you got it from a boyfriend, that's not full and fair disclosure. Not wearing the watch to the client, that's not full and fair disclosure. But that's all right. Preservation of confidentiality, not only of your client's confidentiality, but your employer's as well. This is very important. Dealing fairly, hey, Team 3 brought up fair dealing. Right? I think you brought up fair dealing. And then using reasonable care and prudent judgment, which you all talked about. That's what this analyst did when they came out with this buy recommendation. So you'll see, although these are fundamental ethical principles, they all are reflected in the CFA code and standards. You know? So that's that. One other thing, situational influences have more to do with unethical behavior than a person's character. Under the right conditions, good people, and I mean all of us in this room, can be induced, seduced, and initiated to act unethically. So sometimes we read a story about someone doing something bad in the paper, and we go, oh my goodness, we'd never do that. I can't believe this person did this. But what you don't know is what were the particular circumstances or situation that that person was in that resulted in them making the wrong decision in that point. All right, so I like this. Honesty is the best policy. Okay, now what's the second best policy, right? Well, you know, I always tell people, if you want a job in the investment industry, honesty is not always the best policy. But if you want a career in the investment industry, honesty is the only policy, because no one stays in business for 5, 10, or 15 years by being dishonest. If you've ever taken your car, for example, to get it repaired, and when you get your car back, you feel like they've either charged you too much or you feel like they really haven't repaired what's wrong, what do? You pay them, but then you never go back to that person again. So they were able to make money off of you that one time. But what they lost is that string of income, perhaps, that they would have earned by your taking your car back every time if you trusted them. You know, so trust is so important. All right, so here's our last situation, and again, this is a true story that really is a little quite controversial. So, you were the director of research at Parmite, a very conservative and prestigious investment management firm. You have interviewed over 75 people for an equity analyst position and have narrowed down the applicant pool to one person, Jones. Jones has a finance degree from a top university, a 4.0 grade point average, and was the senior class president. Now, when you Google Jones's name, a YouTube video comes up showing a sparsely clad, barely, I want to say half naked, sparsely clad Jones drinking and partying with friends. You also notice that Jones has made inappropriate comments about friends on Twitter. So what would you do in this circumstance? Would you A, hire Jones? Would you B, try to find more photos of Jones? C, would you ask Jones to explain the photos and Twitter comments? Or would you D, not hire Jones? Talk it over. I can defend every one of these choices as well. All right, have we voted?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm just curious to see. Let's cut to the chase, because this is always so controversial. Let's see what people say. Okay, wow, yeah. Okay, again, really, no right or wrong answer here. So 30% of you would hire Jones. Why? Who would hire Jones? Why would you hire Jones? Team 4. Why would you hire Jones?
Because, for example, if after interviewing 75 people,
Yes.
I've noticed Jones, and he showed him best
Right.
while interviewing.
Right.
Well, obviously he will contribute himself the best to the company.
Okay.
And for me, it will not matter what he does out of the company. For example, how he lives his life, how he spends his time with his friends, and everything.
Okay, so I noticed you said he. Would your answer change if Jones was a woman?
No.
Okay, I just asked because many people just assume Jones is a man. And that's why I had to use
It's
that term,
stereotype.
sparsely clad, because I didn't want to say half naked or anything else, because then you know which half is naked. All right? So, fine. So let's hear from people who said they wouldn't hire Jones. Who wouldn't hire Jones? All right, guys, why wouldn't you hire Jones? Team 1, right?
Yeah.
All right, why wouldn't you hire Jones?
I think because it's potentially harmful for our reputation.
Okay.
And when John will meet, for example, his clients, and the clients will know this information, and will not assume his recommendation as serious.
Yeah, if we Google, have Google, so our clients can Google it too.
Okay, all right. What do you say to that?
We can say him
See,
But
isn't it
it is
hard?
his private
So
life.
easy.
What goes to the internet statement?
Yes. Okay, so what's the issue here? Is it the pictures or is it the Twitter comments?
What is YouTube?
It's the YouTube. So you can say anything you want to on Twitter, but you can't have pictures like that on YouTube. Is that what you're saying?
No.
Yes?
I would say that Twitter comments are as well very bad because, for example, clients or prospective clients may read them.
Right.
And if he says something bad about personality, I don't know, about the nationality, about those things, those issues in the Twitter comments. So I, as a client, may think that he's not ethical. I mean, he treats people differently.
Okay.
So he treats you got it.
Okay, so, but here, I'll ask this, and I think you're right, but remember it says, he has made inappropriate comments about friends. Now think about this. We may call our friends names and say horrible things about our friends because they are our friends, right? But that we might never say to a stranger or someone we don't know. But of course, a client probably wouldn't know that that's your best friend who you're calling all of these different names to. All right? So, to tell you what happened in the real world, in the real life story, I will tell you that Jones was not hired. Precisely because of what you guys said, is that the firm felt that if they could find these comments and pictures, so could their clients. And because this is a conservative and prestigious firm, they didn't want clients coming in saying, hey, I saw one of your equity analysts doing whatever. But here's the reality of the situation, is that nowadays, all firms, when you are applying for a job, look at your social media footprint. All right? And so it may never get as extreme as this, where they take 75 people and narrow it down to one, and then they start Googling that person's name. It may take 75 people, and then you get a pool of 10, and then you start Googling their names. And if you see anything that's inappropriate, you just take that person out of the selection. So it's very, very important for you all to think about anything and everything that you post, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on whatever, because employers really do look at your social media footprint, and it could really affect whether you are getting a job or not. And although someone said, yes, you can remove it, but that's not always a guarantee that you can wipe it all away, you know? So keep that in mind. Couple of last comments. Yes, CFA Charter equals ethics. That's our code and standards, of which you're very familiar with. Now, the unethical actions of infamous wrongdoers who've recently populated the crime sections of the financial papers do not prove they are evil people. Instead, they illustrate that the circumstances in which we find ourselves, often, not always, have more to do with the decisions we make and actions we take than do our basic character traits. Again, there's unethical people, and then there's unethical behavior. And people who behave unethically are not always have bad characters, you know? So, a couple of last comments. Rationalizations. We often use rationalizations to avoid or reduce the negative effect that accompanies performing an unethical act. So we copied the files. Why are you copying the files? Well, because she hired and mentored me. Oh, because she's being unfairly let go. We use rationalizations to justify behavior that is inconsistent with our own opinion of ourselves. We also use rationalizations to change our perception of a situation or social environment, again, to justify our behavior. So here's this quote. There's never been an act done since the beginning, from a kid stealing candy to a dictator committing genocide, that the person doing it didn't think he was fully justified. That's a mental trick called rationalizing, and it's done the human race more harm than anything else you can name. So here's some common rationalizations. Everybody else is doing it, so it must be okay. That's the way they're doing it at the firm down the road. Why can't we do it? If we don't do it, somebody else will. This is the way it's always been done. Doesn't really hurt anyone. It's not a big deal. And notice this one guy said, I want to be a team player. I want to be loyal. And one of those quotes we saw earlier, that's what he was saying. So, How do we resolve an ethical dilemma? Well, first we need to recognize that we're faced with an ethical dilemma. And then we need to determine who's faced with and owns the problem. In the case of the files, that wasn't your problem until you started copying the files to help your boss. Gather the relevant data, get the facts. Whose property do these files belong to? When I say test the wrong versus right parameters, ask yourself, is this legal? Can I do this? Can I not do this? When I say test for the right versus right paradigm, ask yourself, is this ethical? Should I do this or should I not? Apply the resolution principles. Am I putting my client interest first? Is this affecting my independence and objectivity? Am I fully and fairly disclosing everything my client needs to know to make an informed decision? Investigate third way options. There could be a compromise out there. Make a decision and reflect on what you learned from the decision. So, you should start looking for a new job if your boss asks you to do something and then says one of the following: no one will ever know. Or they say, this conversation never happened. Or they say, it doesn't matter how it gets done, as long as it gets done. So I'll leave you with this last quote. If you don't have integrity, you have nothing. You can't buy it. You can have all the money in the world, but if you are not a moral or ethical person, you really have nothing. All right? Okay, thank you all very much.